are other things in this world now that cannot be explained. The end of the world has awoken. Something. We all know the Moth Man is out there, stalking and watching us. But what of the unseen? There are things we can only glimpse in our minds. Great entities beyond our comprehension. The Mothman is a creature more like us than the unknowable horrors in the peripheral vision of our subconscious minds. No longer just a false memory now. I have heard a tale of this entity made real, deep in the earth. And the storyteller was mad by any reckoning, but his story, no less true. My name is Jeff Lane, and I will lay bare this Watcher. No matter how deep I must go, I will come to know the true nature of the Interloper.
Welcome back, one and all, for another installment of Tales from the Wasteland. Now, if you're new here, what we do in this series is we take a look at certain factions within Fallout and dissect them. Have a look at the way that they interact with the Wasteland, have a little bit of history behind them, and learn to understand their roles within the Wasteland. We take a deep dive into where they can be found, look into some of the notes around the areas, and try to understand what it is that makes the people of these factions truly so fascinating. In our last lore video, we took a brief look at the cult of the Mothman, and they mentioned a group called the Dim Ones. But who are the Dim Ones, truly? Are they really believers of the Mothman, or do they serve something much deeper and much more sinister? Our hunt begins in the forest region. A man named Jeff Lane left a holotape mentioning a being called the Interloper. The only problem is, there truly is no trail that leads to this Interloper. Where did he go? How much searching did Jeff have to do to find this Interloper, if he ever did? Well, first, we must look at where the cultists can be found within the forest region, and maybe find some trace of evidence as to where Jeff went to. And where better to start this hunt than the Kanawha County Cemetery? Overshadowed by a large church, the Kanawha Cemetery is a large sprawling area. In this cemetery you can find around 10 cultists. However, if you look around the area, you can also find totems set up for the Mothman, much the same way as these totems were set up during the Mothman equinox. However, things immediately seem off. Of course, it is a cult, so of course things are going to seem off, but this is different. If we look around the steeple of the church, we find that the area has been added onto, almost in the style of a nest. There is wood and bone creating platforms, and even, for lack of a better word, a plank protruding from the side of the church. What is this used for? Well, to my belief, I see it as more of a praying area. However, it could also be a point whereby people are thrown down for sacrifice. Also, within the church, on the second floor, you can find a grisly sight. A person who has been impaled, set up as a sacrifice within a circle of candles. This area immediately shows differences between the cult that we saw on the last lore video versus these cultists. Now, while sacrifice is done on both sides of a cult, the cultists that we interact with only require the sacrifice of radstags, whereas these cultists, you will find there is human sacrifice everywhere. Brutal in their methods, these cultists will always attack you on sight. There are zero friendly interactions that you can have with them, and in any instance that you find them in, you either have to be disguised or they are just outright hostile. Even within events, these cultists are never a friendly sight, and you can be sure that they will always put up a fight. However, why did we come here? Well, in the cultist teachings from the equinox, they mention an entomologist that has been buried within this cemetery. Sadly, however, at least on my journeys, I have not found the doctrine that was mentioned within those teachings. However, they do state that within this doctrine might lie the answer for the Mothman. With that said, however, there is a note here at the cemetery. The note itself can be found on the lectern within the entrance of a church. It reads, "Listen, my followers, I call you not believers, but followers, for we no longer are believers, but followers in these new beginnings. Open your eyes, open your ears, and open your hearts. Have you not heard from all of the new inhabitants of Appalachia? The sightings are real, the encounters are true. We offer the gift of the woods. As we build and expand, we will grow closer to him, away from the plights of man. Look above. We will grow out to him. He is out there, he will come, and we will be there." Of course, within this writing, this is absolutely speaking of the Mothman. However, why are their sacrifice methods so radically different to the cultists that we find in Point Pleasant upon doing the equinox? In order to find out, we need to journey deeper. Our next stop is within the Clancy Manor. It's here at the Clancy Manor where the design philosophy of the cultists really takes place. On the balconied roof of the manor, we find the same protrusion from it that we found in the Kanawha County Cemetery. Only here, it's most definitely used as a place of worship. Dotted around the manor, there are also 3 encampments placed out as though they are lookout areas to keep away intruders from what they're hiding inside. Crafted from mostly trees, branches, and other hollowed out wood, the entrance of the manor holds what would be a sculpted version of the Mothman's face. This same sculpture can be found in most areas that the cultists have built up. However, if we go inside of the manor, we begin to see that not only are the enlightened ones onto something, but so are the dim ones. Scattered around the area of the manor, you can find Mothman eggs. These eggs are formed in a sort of hive, or somewhat like egg clutches from fish. It's a very, very interesting way for the Mothman to be able to procreate. Also within the manor, we can find a couple of holotapes detailing a little bit more about the cultists. The first holotape that we're going to take a look at is named Cultist Redemption. Have a listen.
Yellow covered the sky,
Poison filled the air. Close your eyes and take a deep breath. Allow him to look inside your soul. Desire. I know it's forbidden. He promised to wash it all away. He promised that he will return. Take me. I am yours.
The other holotape that we can find inside the manor is actually a repeating holotape. You can find this particular holotape all over the place in cultist controlled areas. This holotape contains the instructions on how to construct your own Mothman effigy. Sadly, however, it doesn't give you a plan to be able to create it. Have a listen.
Chapter 7. Constructing the effigy. Gather 10 to 20 bundles of sticks underneath the new moon. Bind them tightly with the entrails of the sacrificial beast, and cleanse and bless your tools with holy incense. Construct the form of your effigy with the bundles, using straw or twine to fix them into position. Plant a staff of hewn oak down the center of the effigy. Hammer the staff firmly into the dirt, and pile more sticks, logs, and wood scraps around the base. Anoint your sacred blade with the holy oil made from the Bright One's eggs, and use your blade to bless the effigy for use in your circle.
Now sadly, this location doesn't actually give us any ties as to where Jeff Lane went to, so we have to further move our hunt. Our next placement is going to be inside the Organ Cave. Dotted around the forest region, you can find totems surrounded by a circle of candles. These mark the entrance to the Organ Cave. Covering a rather large area, the Organ Cave is an underground network from hell. And when I say from hell, I mean genuinely from hell. Adopted by the cultists, the water inside this cavern flows a deep crimson, building up a dreary atmosphere. You can find, scattered around the area, totems of sacrifice. There is a small construction resembling a Mothman in a construction light, made up solely of human remains. A skull, some ribs, and a whole lot of light. There are people that have been strung up for torture and eventually death. A person wholly mutilated, cut apart, left with a blade still inside their chest, and placed in front of a Mothman effigy for little more than worship. All through the cave you can find waterfalls that still flow that same crimson. But why is that? Why is it that seemingly blood is just flowing from the roof of the cave? Well, if we walk through one of the many tunnels within the cave, we can find one singular note, the only law within the entire cave. This note is simply named Geologist's Note. It reads, "Whoever finds this, my name was Cyrus Kingdom. I was a student of geology at the Vault-Tec University, investigating local stories of folks pulling blood-red groundwater. I found some surveys in Charleston calling it the Organ Cave, supposedly named after a stone fixture that resembles a pipe organ. The stories were right though, blood-red water. Couldn't be nothing more than the water lingering on top of a large iron ore vein, then making its way to the groundwater, I figured. I still couldn't shake off the feeling that it was a bad omen. Maybe I should have listened to my gut on this one. While mapping this cave out, I felt the earth shake around me, and the next thing I know, I'm trapped in a cave-in. Earthquake? The world ending? That I'll ever know. If I'm ever found after I'm gone, I want my remains to be buried near home. Don't leave me in this hellish place. Love you, Ma. Love you, Pa." Of course, once we've read this, we leave him, trapped down here in this hellish place, and we're kind of just left for a loop. Where do we go from here? We still get no idea as to where Jeff Lane went. There is no mention to him, there is no mention to the Interloper, there is absolutely nothing to tell us the whereabouts or the fate of Jeff. So we're left to wander for a while. We make our way through the mountains and end up in the Maya region. Making our way through the dark, dreary atmosphere of the Maya, we can stumble upon one very small area, a circular holy land dedicated to the worship of the Mothman. Sporting yet another effigy of the Mothman, we have stumbled upon the Moth Home. And it's here that we can get an even better glance at how the cultists operate. Much like many other cultist areas, they have blood troughs, they have Mothman eggs littered around the area, but we can also get a closer look at how they're dressed. See, most of the cultists that we would have come across in the forest just so happen to be wearing normal clothes, and typically they have their faces exposed. However, when we come into the Maya area and all other places, they seem to be dressed in a much darker attire. They have gas masks where the front of it is plated with a skull, with an air filter protruding from where the mouth is. They wear rags seemingly held together by a human spine and decorated with very, very small twigs from trees. To some extent, I suppose you could say that the cultists are quite literally naturalists. However, within the Moth Home, there is nothing of note. The closest thing is once more the worship area protruding from the side of the Holy Land. So sadly, while it is a unique area, we must leave the Moth Home behind and continue our search. Pressing further south within the Maya, we come across an area called Blake's Offering. Once more, a very, very small location. However, this location does hold a couple more notes for us to take a look at. The first one is a holotape called Chapter 8. This holotape, much like Chapter 7, can be found in numerous locations within the Wasteland. Here's what it says.
Chapter 8. Summoning rite. On the night of a full moon, gather your fellows and sit around the effigy. Light the pyre, and have all recite the following incantation as one. O bright one, we bid thee, follow this sacred flame with thy ever-watchful eyes. See clear as day this holy fire we burn in your honor, like cattle to slaughter. We die for thee. Bid us welcome as we beckon thee with this divine lamp, that we may be blessed by the air underneath thy wings.
The other note that we can find here in Blake's Offering is a note called Beckon the Call. This note says, bright winged one sleeps beneath the earth, the silent watching one sleeps beneath the sea. When rivers turn red and sun turns cold, when beast is sacrificed, when all stars fall on the land, and the air turns to poison, when judgment day arrives, the great one awakens, and will demand all pay a price to beckon in the new world. Now this is the first note since Jeff Lane that we can find that mentions anything beyond the Mothman, and it is dark, stating that everyone has to pay a price to beckon in the new world. What does that mean? Well, once more, we sadly get no indication as to what it truly means. And with that, our hunt within the Maya comes to a close. There is no further mention to what we are looking for, so we must continue our journey south into the Cranberry Bog. Within the Cranberry Bog, there is only one area that the cultists reside in. This place is called the Sacramental Glade. This area is among one of their largest dwellings, with multiple buildings, and for once, no worship pyre. Instead, they elect for a sermon area on the roof of one of the buildings, with a lectern placed at the front. Once more, the blood troughs can be found again, only this time they are decorated with skulls and other body parts. There are barrels within the area whereby the contents are burning, likely just for heat. However, among these barrels, there are also ones filled with human remains. so could it also be used for disposal? There are once more totems decorating the area, all there for the worship of the Mothman, to show their devotion towards him. However, within this area, there are also notes. These notes not only show the connection to the public event called Beasts of Burden, but also show that while human sacrifice is a large part of the Dim One's culture, it isn't just humans that they dispose of. The first note that we can find within the Sacramental Glade is a note called A Blessed Gift. It reads, "Holy Mothman, once again you have granted us such benevolent opportunities. Whilst tracking the creature, Elder Adelaide stumbled upon a mindless merchant travelling the roads and crafted a wise, guileful scheme. She posed as a trader and organised a deal for later that week. We spent days crafting an ambush. When the time came, we overpowered the fool and took his supplies, ammunition and pack animal, though the coward knew better than to fight back. Some explosive contraptions were also among the plunder. They appear crude, but will be effective nonetheless. Was this another gift from you, old Divine One? This thundering wrath could aid us in raining hellfire on our enemy. We pray for your continued guidance. Soon you will bear witness to a worthy offering, and your merciful kindness will be rewarded." Walking further along, we can find out what this creature is that they were hunting. We find a note called A Worthy Sacrifice. It reads, "O my shepherd, such blessings you have cast upon us. Grant us your strength once more, for we have found a beast worthy of being sacrificed in your holy name. Its blood is ancient, holding secrets of long ago. The creature has travelled south, and we have trudged through the night in pursuit of the hunt, though our endeavours thus far have proved unfruitful. The monster is strong and savage, snapping in two those that dare step near its vicious jaws. It appears to have taken up residency near a vast bog, and we too have created shelter here whilst we prepare defences and plans to vanquish it. When the time is right, blood will spill, and it shall offer your divine sight visions of ages past." Now, if we think for just a moment, there is only one creature within the Wasteland that we can face that has any ties to ancient beginnings. And we don't mean ancient by way of pre-war. We mean ancient beyond comprehension, dating back millions of years ago. Completion of the Beasts of Burden quest will allow you to see this sacrifice firsthand. The Ogwa, a descendant of turtles and a vicious creature no less. In pursuit of Jeff Lane and this interloper, this area sadly proves unfruitful for our hunt. So we now have very few areas we can go. So we now have to travel to the mountains of the Savage Divide and see if we can find any link to the cultists, Jeff Lane and the interloper. Working our way north through the mountains, we find a location named Crossroads. Not only nestled high in the mountains, but also covered by a vast forest area, the Crossroads is a place of pure worship. On the exterior of the location, there is a small campground littered with mattresses whereby the cultists would sleep, all warmed by one large bonfire in the middle of it. But the main area of the Crossroads is a highly defensible location, blessed once more with the eggs of the Mothman, likely given its blessing. The Crossroads is decorated with totems, all devoted to the Mothman. These totems are encapsulated with a wall of broken down cars, fabrics, trees, bones, absolutely anything that the cultists could get their hands on without disturbing the local wildlife. Sadly, however, there is no notation here to mention where Jeff Lane went, nor anything to do with the interloper. At least in this area, the Crossroads is the end of a road. So we continue our journey south, eventually stumbling upon the Ingram Mansion, later to have been named the Rose Room. Now this area used to be controlled by the cultists. They later vacated the perimeter and new inhabitants have moved in, people from Atlantic City. Immediately upon entering the location, we can find that the cultist constructions have been dismantled and are in the process of being destroyed. However, that's not to say that everything to do with the cultists is gone. The old worship pyre overlooking both the Toxic Valley and the forest region still remains, now being used as a scenic overlook. This area is now charged for tourists to just look over everything, and even more so for them to have their picture taken. It doesn't look as though business is doing all too well. It's also here that you can tell that these pyres were not just for worship, but also for sacrifice. Because if you look below this pyre, there is nothing but a steep drop that people would fall to their deaths. Additional to this, one of the cultists' holotapes have also been left here. This holotape is called Cultist Mind's Eye. Take a listen.
The cathode ray tube is the retina to the mind's eye. Break out of your cocoon. Spread your wings. Embrace his gift. See through his eyes, and you will ascend. Gravity means nothing. Crusades mean everything.
Now sadly, just like all of the areas before, there is no mention to the Interloper nor to Jeff Lane. Where has this man gone to? We still get zero answers. As such, we continue our journey south until eventually we stumble upon a location called Johnson's Acre. Johnson's Acre is a unique location for multiple reasons. Firstly, this location overlooks not just the Cranberry Bog, but also the Skyline Valley. It is a very strong, defensible location due to the fact that it is on a cliff. And these cultists have taken extra measures to make sure that their disposal of bodies is unique. Placed on the top of one of the rocks of the mountain are spring traps that can send bodies hurling off the cliff. Additional to this, there's also a suit of Raider power armor, which if you engage the cultists and can't kill them early enough, one of them will jump into it. This is the first and only time that out of an event we can find cultists wearing power armor. If nothing else, these cultists know how to defend their land. Once we have disposed of the cultists, however, there is not much here. There is a holotape left behind by a pre-war survivor, there is a copy of Chapter 8, and then there is a written note. This, however, is unique. This note is called Always Watching, and it reads, "We look to the sky, tunnel vision. We search for the one, divine, merciful, always watching." Now sadly, there is no further mention towards a person or creature that we are looking for. But as mentioned before, we are overlooking an area called the Skyline Valley, so that is our next stop. Travelling south into the Skyline Valley, the only way that we can continue our quest to find Jeff and the Interloper is to complete some of the quest line for Hugo Stoltz in Vault 63. We are eventually sent on a quest to go and retrieve some technology which will lead us to a ranger cabin at the northernmost point of the Skyline Valley, an otherwise unassuming area. The only way that we can find out that the cult of a Mothman has moved into here is by talking to the ranger at the entrance of the cabin. He will give you a key so that you can go and deal with the cultists, which immediately puts you into combat. Once you have killed these cultists, you can find a singular note within its worship room. This note is called Cultist's Sermon Notes, and it reads, "Take these supplies to perform a ritual near the location of a latest Mothman sighting. We need the Mothman's blessings to retrieve our next offering. This is of utmost importance. And while you're there, maybe grab some more supplies. The gift shop should have some snacks. Don't screw this up. Alex. The great moth has guided us under many moons and many fruitful harvests. Today we shall ask for its blessing, promising a great offering in return. Let us pray to show our devotion. Now while we're here, there is still absolutely nothing to guide us on our quest, so we have to head down to the old Crimea Mines, and in order to actually get in here undetected, we have to kill the cultists that are on the outside guarding. We have to kill the guards on the outside of the mine and grab some cultists' clothes so that we can blend in. Immediately upon entering the mine, something about this sect of a cult seems wrong. These people are always messing up their prayers to the Mothman. They're always getting their vows wrong. And even the area itself seems almost devoid of worship. Now, there is a lectern near the entrance of a cave whereby people would go and worship. However, in regards to other forms of worship, there's almost none. Within this mine, however, you can find notes scattered around the area that will tell you a bit more about these people. In the room of Alex Guerra, the leader of this sect of a cult, we find numerous notes. The first of which is new family, new army. It all started while chatting with some fellas in the crew I was running with. None of us were really feeling the raider lifestyle, so we broke out some drinks, got to talking about the past, about the park. Apparently, they used to have homes down here a few years before the bombs fell. They told me about who stole it all from them, left them all for dead. None other than the man himself, Stoltz. We started scheming right there. One guy said he used to be in with this group of cultists, said they were damn near unstoppable if they had a goal. We just needed to figure out what kind of flame would draw in their mothy gaze, because they believe in a giant holy moth. I didn't mention that yet. Going to loot some of the local bookstores, see if I can read up a bit on this local legend. My new buddy thinks I've got away with words, that I might be able to convince them that I'm some sort of heaven-sent prophet. I know the light at the end of my tunnel, turning that damn mansion into Hugo's funeral pyre, and Audrey's bright beaming face as I rescue her. Now, I just need them to follow me there. Praise the Moth guy. Now immediately here we can tell Alex does not believe in the Mothman at all. She is just using the cultists for her own gain. The journey goes deeper. We find another note called Hugo Must Pay. It reads, "Haven't spoken to another person in so long. I'm going crazy. Just gonna write out some of the thoughts, see how it feels. The bombs saved my life. If they hadn't dropped exactly then, well, I'm not sure I would have gotten away from that lunatic that Hugo sent. Funny thing that. I wonder if Audrey even got my letter. Am I ever gonna see her again? Did she make it to the vault in time?" For a while, finding her is the only thing that kept me going. But as time passes, my real purpose for survival has become clearer by the day. Make Hugo suffer. I know he's somewhere, safe in a cozy vault, sitting pretty on a throne made of the dead that stood in his way. But not me. You didn't get me, you bastard. And best of all, I'll break Audrey free. Away from that psycho. Now, in order to progress the quest, we need to read the next note anyway. But this also gives us more insight into Alex's plan. This is simply named Password Sheet, and it reads, "How often are those idiots gonna mess things up? This is the third time this week I'm changing my password. I've sent some of them up to a Shenandoah Visitor Center to get blessings from the Mothman, but really I wanted them out of my way so they don't ruin Cassidy's big send-off. Not only do I have to start writing these new passwords down now so I don't forget, but I'm also running out of ideas. The new password is, to peek past Pepper, you must pester Pepper's peers to apprise Pepper's password to pass past Pepper's pier. Now that is a tongue twister. But it's not just Alex that doesn't believe in the Mothman. In fact, you'll find it's actually a few other people. You can find a ghoul named Blair sitting near the entrance of the Crimea Mine. And Blair is consistently messing up his vows to the Mothman. He is one of the named people that you can speak to, and he makes it plainly obvious he does not believe in the Mothman at all. Is Blair the person that led Alex to leading this army of cultists? Now, while we allow that question to fester in your minds, we walk up to Pepper and tell him the password. He lets us pass reluctantly, and we can work our way down to the cave's prison. Here, we can find a note on a dead blood eagle. This note is named Prisoner's Note, and it reads, "We ran into some cultists today while doing a pickup job. Rest of those damn cowards fled. Left me, Patrick, Dustin, and Hunter to these freaks. They took us to some old mine shaft, freezing down here now that all the adrenaline settled. Hell, I've done some sadistic crap with a crew over the years, but having it happen to our guys makes me feel sick to my stomach. They took Patrick away, didn't see him again, but sure did hear him. Hell of an echo down here. Seems they need to keep a few of us alive for some ritual, so they won't kill all of us. But that don't stop them from using us for fun. Cut us, burn us, bash our heads, crush our fingers, flay us alive. Taking stuff right out of our playbook. Except they spend the whole time praising some bug while doing it. At least there's some comfort in knowing one of them is a bit different from the others. This ghoul gal, she's a straight shooter. None of this Mothman nonsense when talking to us. Like she doesn't belong here with these cultists. Weird thing is, she acts totally different around the others. Even though she seems like the boss. Like she's putting on an act. But at least she sneaks us some scraps when they're not around. If we ever get out of here, I'm done with the Blood Eagles. I can't be part of anything horrific no more. Can't do things like this to people. I need to get out. I'm scared. But I need to get out. Someone's coming. Maybe this is my chance. I've got to try. Of course, we can tell that that escape attempt did not work. However, Eliza, this Blood Eagle, she gives us even more important insight. Alex acts totally different around the other cultists. This means that the majority of the cultists in this mine actually do believe in the Mothman. So why do these cultists keep messing up their vows? Well, Blair pretty much tells us it. This mine is where the cult of the Mothman have been sending anyone who is deemed worthless to the cult. These people have always messed up their prayers, messed up their rituals, and have failed to keep the area secure. So this is their last stop. Journeying further down the mine, we can eventually find a giant ritual site. It's yet another bonfire with a headless corpse of the Blood Eagle that was taken away, who was tortured and then killed in the name of the Mothman, overlooked by none other than Alex herself. We can talk to Alex, but this only ends one way. Despite what we might think, Alex must die. So we can find out as much information as is possible from her as to why she began her own crusade. I will talk more in depth about this on a later video. However, the only reason why the cult of a Mothman is down here is because of her and her vendetta against Hugo Stoltz. So where does this leave us? We have 0 leads. There is nothing to point us towards Jeff Lane and towards the Interloper. So we have to backtrack. We have to retrace our steps and see if there is something that we have missed. So with this, we need to travel back up to the forest. Traveling north into the forest again, if we go just east of Vault 76, we can find the Wilson Brothers Auto Repair. And in the house just to the north of the auto repair shop, we can find a basement. Inside this basement, while there is no law, we do see that there is a small sacrificial altar with a dead mole rat. And in here we can also get the Mothman Museum basement key. If we take this key and go to the basement of the museum, we can once more find a place of worship. And on the lectern hidden down there are 2 more notes for us to read. These notes are Sermon, Summoning the Mothman, and Sermon, Impending Doom. Could this give us the answers that we need for this search for Jeff Lane and the Interloper? Let's take a read. Summoning the Mothman. Sermon, October 21st, 2077. We of the cult of the Mothman seek the infinite cosmic wisdom of the Mothman himself, for it is his appearance that portends disaster, and in heeding his warnings we may live as others around us perish to their fated doom. We welcome visits from the Mothman with open arms and minds. Yes, we shall willingly summon him forth to appear to us who revere him and divulge his secrets. True believers among you, gather for this evening's we welcome you, O Mothman. Accept our humble invitation and divert us from disaster. Impending Doom. Sermon, October 22nd, 2077. The all-knowing Mothman has been summoned forth. Though we were not all so lucky as to notice it, Brother Charles saw the Mothman appear out of the corner of his eye and heard whispers of impending disaster. But as quickly as he appeared, our saviour was gone. The Mothman showed visions of terrible floods to occur tomorrow. The only way to survive, he says, is to find high ground or be swept away. Our brothers and sisters will be warned. Those who scoff at us and turn away from the way of the Mothman shall perish for their foolish disregard, while we gather on the rooftops to praise the coming of the raging waters in the early dawn light. Now this tells us something extremely important. Remember that these sermons happened pre-war, merely 2 and 1 day prior to the bombs dropping. There was no indication towards the nukes coming, not until they'd already landed. As such, these pre-war survivors received an early visage into the nukes dropping. This was no mere coincidence. This was the Mothman warning them of the nukes to come. And we need to heed the message of finding high ground. Now, this in and of itself does not tell us anything. But if we look back to my Point Pleasant video, there was mention that one of the wise ones came from the Lucky Hole mine. This is the last mentioned area that the cult of the Mothman has been near. So we need to journey back south, back into the Savage Divide, and we need to find the Lucky Hole mine. Engraved deep in the mountainside, overlooking the old Allegheny Asylum, we find the Lucky Hole mine. Immediately at the entrance of the mine, we can find 3 cultists worshipping a shrine to the Mothman. And immediately we can grasp that we are finally making traction on the Interloper. Making our way inside, something immediately seems unsettling, almost as though there's an ominous wisp in the air. Immediately to our right, we can find a note and a terminal. The note that is on the desk is called He Agrees, and it simply reads, "Your offering is acceptable to him." But this makes no mention to the Mothman, where normally any message referencing the Mothman would at least mention it. This does not. But looking at the terminal, we can find some pre-war messages. The first entry is called Strange Woman. This old lady came by, asking for a tour of a mine. told her no, place is dangerous. But that just made her mad. Kept muttering something under her breath. Had to get the Protectrons to escort her out. I'm going to make a call to Allegheny Asylum, see if they had any escapees recently. Poor woman. I hope she gets help. The next message on there is called Closing Up. Word came in to shut things down. About time. Hate to see a mine close, but this one is tapped out. I was coming back from shutting down the pumps when I felt someone watching me. That old lady again. But this time, she was with a couple of friends. They asked again about the mine. Wanted to see the depths. Wanted me to show them. God help me, I ran. The last message is called Break-In. I don't know why, but I had to check the mine one last time. Sure enough, the locks we put up have all been smashed open. Look, we don't want it. The mine, it's yours now. Just stay down there, alright? Don't bother us and we won't bother you. Deal? Now this is getting dark. The fact that these 3 women showed up, unwarranted, knowing that the mine itself was not open for the public, that is just not normal. Now, his immediate belief that they might be an escapee from the asylum is entirely fair, considering the fact that the asylum is only down the road. Could it be something darker? Could we have finally stumbled upon the Interloper? If we walk immediately to the left and go up the stairs, we can find, finally, a link to Jeff Lane. He has finally shown up again in a holotape called The Chosen.
The Interloper is here. I can feel it clearly. Last night, in visions more real than the senses, it called to me, and I go to it now. Signs are all around that I am not the only one to hear the call, though where they have failed, I will not, for it summons me alone in the end. Before I go deeper, for the truth revealed changes all. By its very nature, let it be known, in this world, the Interloper has chosen Jeff Lane as the conduit of the unknowable. Together, the hidden reality becomes manifest at long last.
This is it. This is where the Interloper is. Jeff has found him, and now so have we. If we can just find the depths of the cave. Journeying further down, we can find another copy of Chapter 7, once again, detailing how to create the effigies of the Mothman. However, next to this holotape, there is yet another note. This note is called His Blood. The woods gave him life, gave him strength, but the blood gave him purpose. He gathered us. He taught us to share as he shared. But again, this makes no mention to the Mothman. It is simply saying he, him, his. There is no doubt that we have found the Interloper, and we will find more and more notes nestled along the trail. Further down the line, we find a note called His Birth. He is the one who came before, the firstborn of the wood. Blood wept from his branches, and he shared with all his believers. Now, we need to think more about this note and the one that came before. Speaking of the forests, the wood, the branches, what does this mean? Is this a forest-born creature? Is this a terrestrial being? Or is it something more malevolent? Journeying ever deeper into one of the springs of the mine, we find yet another note called His Springs. His believers wept, for their new home lacked water, and their throats were dry. He gathered their tears in his branches and spread them upon the earth, and from that came forth the springs. Whatever this creature is, at least for those devout to him, it seems to care. But what of those who don't believe in his message or his being. What does the Interloper think of them? Well, we don't get immediate clarification, but considering the fact that the cultists are immediately hostile to us and do not want to welcome us into the fold, we can only imagine the manipulation that the Interloper is doing to its followers. Now, as we venture past the springs, we can happen upon their sermon area, a much larger sprawling part of their cave, with an elevated platform for a lectern to sit and for the sacrifices that they make to be elevated and displayed to all. And now it makes more sense. The sacrifices that the Dim Ones make have never been to please the Mothman. While they are all devout believers of the Mothman, the human sacrifices, the sacrifices of those larger than people, of apex predators, of creatures of times long past, they were never to appease the Mothman, but instead to earn favour with the Interloper, to allow it to gain wisdom from those who have been sacrificed. Upon finding this sacrificial altar, we find another copy of chapter 8, and alongside it we find a singular note called His Priestess. Blessed are you, first priestess of the wood. Through you we heard his voice. Through you we gained his strength. We no longer find any more notes within the mine. If we continue through the tunnels behind the sermon area, we can find a small lab, and inside this lab we can also find a ritual mask and our own set of cultist robes. But where is this Interloper? We still have no sign of it, and yet something more ominous compels us to try to find somewhere deeper. Hugging the walls immediately outside of the lab reveals yet another hidden away area, and as we venture deeper, we are met with the main sacrificial plane. Immediately upon walking into it, we are greeted with 3 more cultists, standing atop a mountain of skeletons. After dispatching these cultists, we can get a true look at everything around us. Immediately as we step in, there is an obelisk directly in front of us, where the cultists would worship the Interloper. And immediately to our right, we see a large, grotesque being. This is the Interloper, an injured being lying almost lifeless on the floor, only met with a slight movement of its tentacles protruding from its head. This is no normal creature. This supernatural being is not from this world, or at least not the world that we know. Surrounding it is a semicircle of giant heads. But what does this mean? These heads can be found on the sides of so many buildings within the Wastelands. But why are they here? What significance do these have to this creature? One can only be left to assume. However, if this creature can reside here and can compel so many souls to commit such atrocious acts, all that we can wonder is, are there any other beings out there that could be doing the same thing to unsuspecting souls? Are there any other creatures lying beneath the ground, corrupting the thoughts and actions of other people that may have come into contact with it or just be in its immediate vicinity? But for this Interloper, our search, our investigation is finally concluded. We have found this being and put to rest its followers. So where do we go next? What story do we unfold? And whose lives are going to be affected by them? Find out again by tuning in every Wednesday for a new video. Thank you very much. So. Very almost an hour of your time you have spent here. Why? I mean, thank you, but why? Regardless of anything, this has been the hardest video I've ever had to work on. With 225 in-game clips and over 1,000 voice clips after editing, this has been such a painstaking, grueling journey. So I would appreciate it very, very, very much if you would hit the like, subscribe button and leave a comment. Tell me where you want us to go next for these lore videos. And remember that I also stream on Twitch. So I'm going to be leaving that link and a link to all of my other social platforms down in the description below. Additional to that, we've started doing some challenge runs on top of everything. And we also look into the history of some locations in the games that show up in real life. Make sure that you tap in on the attached playlists so that you can go back and watch everything else that we have done thus far. And remember to stick with us on this journey every Wednesday, my friends. Thank you very much. Goodbye.